Welcome to the debate. Okay, so project execution, it's almost always defined by uncertainty, isn't it? Especially in complex, high-stakes work. Critical chain project management, CCPM, it tackles this head-on. It moves away from, padding every single task and instead pulls that safety time into strategic reserves, buffers. And today, we're digging into the two main types, the project buffer, or PB, and the feeding buffers, FBs. Now, they're designed to work together, kind of like project shock absorbers. But the real question, the debate today, is which one provides the more essential function? Is it the big centralized shield, the PB, protecting that final commitment? Or is it the localized shields, the FBs, that keep the actual work, the critical chain, flowing smoothly? I'll be making the case that the project buffer is really the cornerstone. Its role in aggregating risk strategically and holding that final delivery date for stakeholders, that's paramount.
Okay. And I'm going to challenge that prioritization. I think the feeding buffers are fundamentally more vital. They are the indispensable frontline defense. They protect the operational integrity of the critical chain day-to-day, and crucially, they act as that immediate early warning system you need for, proactive management.
All right, let's start with the project buffer then, the PB. So this is the pooled time reserve, and it's positioned strategically after the very last critical task. Its whole purpose defines the final project completion date. That's the date, the only date we really commit to externally with stakeholders. And its strength, it's strategic and it's statistical. See, when we implement CCPM, we asked teams to estimate tasks aggressively, like maybe a 50% probability level, which means realistically we expect about half the tasks to overrun slightly. We then take all that time we saved, the padding we removed, and aggregate it into the PB. Often it's sized around, say, 50% of the total safety removed, but that's just a starting point, really. The real power comes from risk pooling, basic statistics.
Right. That's a key part of the theory, I agree. But I think the emphasis is, a bit misplaced. You're focusing on shielding the finish line, but what about the operational integrity you need just to get there? Feeding buffers, the FBs, they're inserted right where those non-critical paths, the feeding chains, merge into the critical chain. They are the localized shock absorbers. CCPM is all about maintaining the flow, that sort of critical relay race idea. FBs are the direct mechanism ensuring that flow. They stop that common problem of cascading delays. They're built specifically to absorb the bumps from other work streams, late parts from a supplier, delays in outsourced design work, waiting on approvals before any of that variability hits the main critical tasks. They get used up first for any feeder delay. And only if a delay is really bad enough to burn through the entire FB, only then does it start eating into the project buffer. That localized frontline protection, that's what makes them operationally essential, I'd argue.
I understand the focus on internal flow, I really do. But the fundamental reliability gain that CCPM offers, the thing that gets reported upwards, that comes from the project buffer's central role. The PB is the engine driving improved on-time delivery to the customer or client. We've seen studies, right? Organizations using this saw duration cuts averaging around 39%, while hitting schedules 70% more often. That kind of improvement is deeply tied to the PB concept. And why is that? Because the PB lets the organization rally the entire team around one fixed, ambitious external deadline. And it tackles two big behavioral problems we see all the time. It helps counter Parkinson's law, work just expanding to fill whatever time's available because tasks don't have that hidden padding anymore. And it also fights student syndrome, where people wait until the last minute to start. The PB forces everyone to focus on the overall project finish date. It becomes the main strategic lever for control.
But I have to push back on that. How can you reliably read an external date if the internal foundation, protected by the FBs, isn't solid? The critical path is just so vulnerable to delays from these non-critical feeding paths.
If you strip out contingency from those feeding tasks without putting in FBs, you're basically guaranteeing that the first hiccup on a side path immediately impacts your main schedule. Look at some of the UK construction case studies from the 90s. Those projects are tangled webs of dependencies, right? Utility relocation, getting specialized gear, environmental checks. In projects managed by firms like Balfour Beatty back then, using FBs was absolutely critical for coordinating different trades. Say, relocating utilities, a feeding chain runs 2 weeks late. Well, the feeding buffer for that activity absorbs the hit. That meant the main critical task, maybe the final road paving, could still kick off exactly when planned. The FB is the only thing that truly isolates the critical path from all that parallel noise.
Okay, I acknowledge the FB's crucial role in isolating things. Absolutely. But we need to be clear about the scope of risk each buffer handles. FBs protect the critical path from external variations, like you said, coming in from those feeding chains. The PB, though, its job is to cover the aggregated risk that's inherent in the critical chain tasks themselves. You know, the everyday variability, the unexpected stuff that happens even on the main path, stuff we couldn't eliminate, even with the best planning. The PB ensures that even if our aggressive, optimized critical task estimates turn out to be, well, wrong, and let's face it, they often are because of unknown unknowns, we still have that big, statistically efficient safety net detecting against critical path overruns. If you didn't have the PB, there'd be no mechanism at all to shield the final delivery date from delays that pop up within the critical path itself.
My issue, though, is that the PB feels purely reactive. It only signals a problem after a delay has already hit the critical path, or after a feeder delay has already blown through its own buffer. Feeding buffers, on the other hand, give you the most immediate, actionable early warning. That allows for proactive steps. Think about it. Heavy use of one specific FB instantly tells you there's a problem in that precise workstream. If you're building, say, a complex defense system and the buffer protecting the software module delivery starts draining fast, the project manager knows exactly where to focus attention, maybe chase that supplier, or reallocate resources. And this happens before the delay even touches the critical path. That gives you maximum lead time to react. It's about operational precision.
That precision is only really valuable within the broader system context. And that's where the project buffer truly shines. The project buffer fever chart. That's the real powerhouse metric for system-level risk management. It plots how much of the PB has been consumed against how much of the critical chain is actually complete. This gives you that essential, holistic view, the big picture that senior management absolutely needs. Take the GlaxoSmithKline R&D example. A senior person there specifically highlighted how the fever chart changed everything for their project oversight. Before, status reports were just, looking backward at what went wrong. But the CCPM buffer monitoring, it flagged potential issues in advance, allowing management to help overcome obstacles and prevent problems escalating. That's the shift, isn't it? From backward-looking reports to proactive, strategic insight. The PB chart makes reporting predictive, not just historical.
Okay, the PB chart shows overall project health. I'll grant you that. It's a necessary temperature check, but an exhausted FB tells the PM exactly where the fire is burning right now. It points to the specific operational emergency. When time is critical, you need that FB precision to allocate resources fast and effectively. Sure, both are essential, but the FB drives the daily, tactical decisions needed to keep the flow going. It fundamentally changes the daily stand-up conversation from who's late to how do we protect this specific buffer. That fosters a culture of, transparent early warning.
Let's shift gears slightly to implementation. The project buffer, I think, faces the biggest practical hurdle in external-facing contracts. The research points this out, especially in sectors like UK construction. Even after successful pilots, like those at Denny Construction, the major barrier was often contractual accountability. Think about it. Subcontractors, vendors, they're very hesitant to give up their own contingency time. Why? Because their contracts hold them accountable for fixed deadlines, often with penalties. If they pool their safety time into some central PB, they risk getting penalized for a delay that started somewhere else entirely on the critical path, and they have zero control over that shared buffer. So the PB concept often gets undermined by traditional legal and business practices and negates the very statistical efficiency we were talking about earlier.
That's a really strong point about the legal realities. I agree. But the feeding buffer concept, it hinges on a massive cultural shift within the organization. And honestly, that's often the bigger, tougher mountain to climb, regardless of the contract type. You see, FBs only work if teams buy into providing those aggressive task durations. They have to genuinely trust that the time they give up will be used collectively to protect the whole project, not used to punish them individually later. If management doesn't build that trust, what happens? Teams start sandbagging their estimates again, or maybe cutting corners to meet the aggressive times. And that behavior just undermines the feeding pads and, ironically, burns through the FBs almost immediately. So yeah, the PB has contractual hurdles which involve negotiation, but FBs demand we root out deep-seated behaviors like Parkinson's law and student syndrome. That takes sustained, daily change management effort internally. And that cultural piece is often the real sticking point. Even in places like software development, where sometimes CCPM is seen as, well, too rigid.
I don't disagree that the cultural change is absolutely critical for any CCPM success, but I'd argue the structural failure is more damaging if contracts prevent the PB from functioning properly. If you can't pool the time legally or contractually, the PB simply doesn't work as intended. The core statistical benefit, the very reason CCPM can deliver faster schedules, is just lost. You might end up with well-managed feeding paths, sure, but if the critical path risk is still handled traditionally with padded tasks everywhere, you're basically left with a slow, old-style schedule that's just managed a bit better internally.
I see what you mean about losing the full statistical punch without the PB fully enabled by contracts. But I still think the structural benefits of FBs, things like less rework, better coordination between teams, those still deliver significant value, even if the overall schedule shortening isn't as dramatic. FBs force people to focus on those handoffs, on the quality and timing of work feeding the critical chain. And that's a huge operational win in itself, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, okay. It feels like we're circling back to a practical reality here. The research, especially looking at construction, seems to conclude that you really need both. You have to align the external contracts to make the PB possible, and you have to do the internal work, the training, the culture change, so teams manage tasks aggressively and use FBs effectively. They're codependent, really. The full promise of CCPM, faster and more reliable delivery, it only truly happens when you address both the strategic shield and the operational defenses together. So, to wrap up my view, the project buffer provides that essential aggregate protection. It guarantees the final delivery date, leveraging the statistical power of risk pooling. And it gives us that key high-level status metric, the fever chart, which is crucial for predictive oversight. It shields the organization's promise from all the variability bubbling up within the critical path itself.
And I'll reaffirm my position. The feeding buffers are the indispensable operational shields. They protect the critical chain from all that upstream variance, acting as that localized, immediate warning system. This enables precise, fast, proactive management, which is what keeps the project flowing. They are the tactical tools that ensure critical tasks can start on time, preventing those cascading delays that so often derail complex projects. Ultimately, the real strength of critical chain project management isn't just in one buffer type over the other. It's in how they function together, symbiotically. One shields the final external promise, and the others shield the day-to-day operational integrity of the critical path from incoming hits. Together, they create that robust schedule, those shock absorbers we talked about, capable of handling uncertainty and making sure save time is pooled effectively. That gives you the resilience you need. And hopefully, understanding this distinction gives practitioners a clearer map for managing their own complex projects.